The alarm on my wrist device screamed at 3 in the morning, and before my eyes even opened, I already knew something was wrong. My name is Daniel Ford, and I worked as an orbital tracking engineer at a small station on the edge of a coastal city. That night, the sky did something it had never done before. A bright line cut across the stars, then split into hundreds of smaller lines, all moving toward us, at a speed that made my hands shake just watching the readout. I ran to the control room barefoot, my shirt half-buttoned, my mind racing faster than my legs. Laura Bennett, the woman who worked the night shift with me, was already standing at the main screen, her face pale under the blue light of the monitors. "Daniel, look at this," she said, her voice tight and careful, like she was trying not to believe what she was seeing. On the screen, hundreds of shapes were forming a pattern above the planet. Not scattered, not random, a perfect formation, like a net being thrown over the entire world. My throat went dry. I had studied orbital mechanics for 10 years, and I had never seen anything move with that kind of precision. No human fleet could line up like that. No human fleet was that big. "Are those ships?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Laura nodded slowly. "They came out of nowhere. One second the deep space sensors were clean, the next second the whole sky was full of them. Within minutes, every screen in the building was flashing red. Calls came in from other tracking stations around the world, all saying the same thing. Something enormous had arrived, and it was not asking for permission to be here. I stepped closer to the window and looked up at the sky myself, without any screen between me and what was happening. At first it looked like new stars had been born, tiny points of light scattered across the black. But then one of the points grew brighter, and I realized it was getting closer. My stomach tightened. This was not a star. This was a ship, entering the atmosphere in plain sight of anyone who cared to look up. A voice crackled through the emergency channel on the main speaker, deep and steady, but wrong in a way I could not describe. It did not sound like a machine, and it did not sound like a person either. It was something in between, calm, in a way that felt more frightening than shouting would have been. "People of this world," the voice said, "resistance is unnecessary. Your planet has been selected for integration. Remain in your homes. Cooperation ensures your safety." Nobody in the control room said a word for a moment. Integration. The word hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Laura, and she looked back at me, and I think we both understood in that instant that our lives, and every life on the planet, had just changed forever. "We need to get word to command," Laura said, already reaching for the phone. Her hand trembled slightly as she dialed. I turned back to the screen and started recording everything I could, every angle of every ship, every strange shape moving across our sensors. If this was really happening, someone would need the data. Someone would need proof of exactly what we were dealing with. The ships did not look like anything from our movies or our games. They were smooth and curved, almost delicate-looking, built from a material that caught the moonlight in a strange silver shimmer. They did not look like weapons of war. They looked like they belonged in a museum, not in our sky preparing for a fight. That should have been my first warning, that something about this invasion was not going to go the way the aliens expected. Within an hour, the news channels around the world had picked up the story, and every screen showed the same images from different angles. People filled the streets outside, looking up, some crying, some standing in stunned silence, some already packing bags to run, though nobody knew where running would even help. I stayed inside the station, glued to my monitors, watching numbers scroll past that I barely understood myself. A call came through from higher command, patched straight into our station. A tired voice on the other end asked for anyone with clear sensor data. I answered, giving my name and position, and within seconds I was speaking with someone identified only as Commander Peter Grant. "Ford, tell me what your instruments are picking up," he said, his voice rough, like he had already been awake for days, even though this had only started an hour ago. "Sir, we are seeing full orbital coverage. Hundreds of contacts, evenly spaced, forming what looks like a defensive net around the planet. No visible weapon discharge yet. They are broadcasting a message demanding surrender. There was a pause on the line. Understood. Keep your channel open. We need every set of eyes we can get. I stayed at my post through the night, watching as smaller vessels detached from the larger ships and began their descent through the atmosphere. Laura brought me coffee I never drank, and together we tracked each new arrival, marking coordinates, sending updates to command every few minutes. My hands ached from typing, my eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I could not look away. This was the biggest thing that had ever happened, and somehow I had a front-row seat to it. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first wave of landing craft touched down in open fields outside several major cities. I watched the footage come through on a secondary feed, grainy and shaking, clearly filmed by someone hiding nearby with a phone. The pods opened slowly, releasing a strange colored mist, and then figures began to step out. They were tall, taller than any person I had ever seen, with long limbs and narrow frames wrapped in silver-colored suits that seemed to glow faintly at the joints. Their movements looked graceful in a way that reminded me of dancers, light and floating, almost too perfect to be real. "Look at them," Laura whispered, leaning over my shoulder to watch the same feed. "They look almost fragile." I did not answer right away. Something about the way they moved struck me as odd, though I could not place why. They stepped carefully, testing the ground beneath them with each step, as if unsure of themselves. For beings who had just crossed the stars to conquer our world, they did not look particularly confident about simply standing on it. The voice returned over every broadcast channel, repeating its calm demand for surrender. Cities began evacuating, though nobody knew where safety could possibly be found when the enemy controlled the sky itself. I kept working, kept tracking, kept sending numbers to Commander Grant and his team, hoping that somewhere in all this data there might be something useful, some weakness, some mistake. By mid-morning, reports started coming in from the ground teams stationed near the landing zones. The first messages were short and confusing, full of words that did not make sense together. Struggling, slow, falling. I read them over and over, trying to understand what exactly the soldiers on the ground were seeing. Commander Grant called back into our station just after noon, his voice carrying a strange note I had not heard from him before. It almost sounded like disbelief. "Ford, Bennett, I need you two to look at something," he said. "Pull up the live feed from the Eastern Landing Site. Tell me if I am seeing this correctly." I switched my screen over, and Laura leaned in close beside me. On the feed, a group of the tall alien figures stood near their landing pod, and one of them had fallen to its knees in the dirt. Another figure moved to help it stand, but it too seemed to struggle, its long legs bending awkwardly under its own weight. "They look like they can barely hold themselves up," Laura said slowly. I stared at the screen, my mind already turning over the possibilities. These were beings who had built ships that could cross unimaginable distances, weapons capable of leveling cities, technology beyond anything human science had achieved. Yet here they were, unable to simply stand on solid ground without help. "Commander," I said into the radio, choosing my words carefully, "it looks like something about our environment is affecting them physically. I do not have a full explanation yet, but I think we might have found something important." There was a pause, then Grant's voice came back, quieter this time. "Keep watching, Ford. Send me everything you get. If there really is a weakness here, we need to understand it before they figure out how to fix it." I turned back to my screen, heart pounding, no longer just from fear. For the first time since the ships appeared in our sky, I felt something else creeping in alongside the terror. A small, careful thread of hope. Outside, the world was still in chaos. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, and the sky remained full of ships waiting patiently above us, confident in their coming victory. But down on the ground, in the mud and dirt of a quiet field, something was already beginning to go wrong for them, and none of us yet understood exactly why. I looked over at Laura, who was already pulling up more footage, more data, her fingers moving quickly across her keyboard. "Whatever this is," she said without looking up, I think it might be the only thing standing between us and them." I nodded, my throat tight, and turned my attention back to the screen, watching as more of the tall, elegant invaders struggled simply to stay on their feet in a world that felt, to them, far heavier than they had ever imagined. By the second day, the entire station had turned into something close to a war room, though none of us had trained for this kind of war. Commander Grant had moved a small team into our building, since our sensors happened to be some of the clearest covering the eastern landing zones. Among them was a soldier named Nathan Price, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes who had been pulled straight from a training exercise when the ships first appeared. He stood near my desk most of that morning, watching the screens with a focus that made me nervous just to be near. "You are the one who first reported them falling down," he said, not quite a question. "Along with Laura," I said, nodding toward her desk. "We noticed it early, but we still do not understand the reason." Nathan crossed his arms, studying the paused footage of an alien soldier struggling to lift a piece of equipment from its landing pod. "Doesn't matter why yet. Matters that it's happening. I saw 3 of them go down just trying to cross open ground near the tree line. No shots fired. They just could not keep moving." Laura turned in her chair to face him. "It is like their bodies were not built for something here. Maybe the air, maybe the pressure. We are still gathering readings. Or maybe it's something simpler than that," I said, half to myself, my eyes fixed on the readouts scrolling across my second monitor. An idea had been forming in my head since the night before, something so basic I almost felt foolish even considering it. What if it is not about the air at all? What if it is about weight? Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Weight. Gravity," I said, sitting up straighter as the thought took shape. "What if their bodies simply are not built for how strongly this planet pulls on them? If their homeworld has less gravity than ours, then everything about them, their bones, their muscles, even the frame of their equipment, would be built for a much lighter pull. Coming here would be like asking someone from a mountain town to instantly carry twice their own body weight and keep walking like nothing changed." Laura's eyes widened slightly. "That would explain why their movements look so careful. They are not being cautious. They are struggling." Commander Grant, who had been listening from across the room, walked over and leaned against the edge of my desk. "Ford, if you are right about this, it changes everything about how we need to fight. Get me proof. Real numbers, not guesses." I turned back to my monitors and got to work, pulling every scrap of footage we had collected, measuring the way the alien soldiers moved, the angle of their falls, the way their equipment seemed to strain and creak under stress that should not have bothered anything built with advanced technology. Laura worked beside me, cross-checking data from other stations around the world, all reporting similar patterns from different landing zones. Hours passed in a blur of numbers and footage. Somewhere outside the walls of our building, the invasion continued, cities emptied, and people hid in shelters, not knowing if the enemy above them would ever show mercy. But inside our small room, something else was happening. A puzzle was slowly coming together, piece by piece, and every new piece pointed toward the same conclusion. "Here," I finally said, turning my monitor toward Nathan and Commander Grant. "Watch this clip closely." The footage showed a group of alien soldiers attempting to move a large piece of machinery, something that looked like a weapon platform, across uneven ground. 2 of them strained against its weight, their long limbs shaking with effort, until finally one leg buckled and the entire structure tipped sideways, crashing down into the mud. "That machine should not be difficult to move for beings with technology like theirs," I said. "Unless everything about it was built assuming a much lighter environment. If their homeworld pulls at even half the strength ours does, then that machine would feel twice as heavy the moment it landed here. Their own bodies would feel twice as heavy too." Nathan let out a low whistle, staring at the screen. "So the whole reason they're falling over, dropping their gear, moving slow, it's not fear, it's not unfamiliar terrain, it's actual weight, crushing down on them, harder than they expected." That would also explain their timing, Commander Grant said thoughtfully. Reports are coming in that their aircraft are burning fuel far faster than expected. If their engines were built to lift a certain weight on a lighter world, then everything they brought here would need far more power just to do the same job. I nodded, feeling something like excitement mixing with my exhaustion. It is not just their bodies, it is everything. Their tools, their vehicles, their weapons. If all of it was designed around a lighter pull, then all of it is now working against them the moment they try to use it here. Laura pulled up another screen showing thermal readings from one of the alien landing sites. Look at this. Their equipment is overheating in places it should not be. I think their machines are working much harder than designed, trying to compensate for the extra strain. Commander Grant straightened up, his expression sharpening with the look of a man who had just found the first real advantage since this nightmare began. Ford Bennett, I want everything you have compiled sent to every command post within the hour. If this is true, and if it is happening everywhere the way it is happening here, then we have found something we can use. Word spread quickly through the network of command stations scattered across the world. Reports came flooding back from other cities, all confirming the same strange pattern. Alien soldiers stumbling, equipment failing, vehicles moving slower than expected, sometimes breaking down entirely after only short distances. It was not isolated to our region. It was happening everywhere the invaders had landed. That evening, I watched a live feed from a northern city where a group of soldiers had set up a defensive position along a hillside road. The alien forces advancing toward them moved in careful, measured steps, clearly trying to conserve energy, but even their careful pace was not enough. As the incline grew steeper, several of them began falling behind, their long legs trembling with visible effort just to climb what would have been an easy walk for any ordinary person. They're choosing flat ground whenever they can, Nathan observed, watching the same feed over my shoulder. Makes sense now. Hills, stairs, uneven ground, all of that probably feels brutal to them. Which means high ground just became one of our biggest advantages, Commander Grant said, already turning to relay the information to other units. Get this to every defensive position we have. Tell them to hold elevated positions whenever possible. Force any advance uphill. I felt a strange mixture of relief and unease settle over me. For the first time since the ships appeared, we had something solid, something real, that could actually help. But it also meant understanding just how close this fight truly was, and how much still hung in the balance. Late that night, after most of the command team had gone to grab a few hours of rest, I stayed behind with Laura, still poring over data, trying to understand exactly how the invaders had made such a costly mistake. It did not make sense to me that a species capable of crossing the stars would not know something as basic as the gravity of the world they intended to conquer. Maybe they never actually landed here before, Laura suggested, rubbing her tired eyes. Maybe all their information came from something far away, a scan from a distance, or an old record that was never checked again. That would explain it, I said slowly, the pieces falling into place in my mind. If their scouting data was old, or gathered under strange conditions, they might have built their entire invasion plan around numbers that were simply wrong. A mistake that big, Laura said quietly, shaking her head. It could cost them everything. I looked back at the screen, at the footage of soldiers struggling to lift equipment that should have been effortless for them, at vehicles breaking down under strain they were never built to handle, and I felt a small, careful flicker of something I had not felt since this all began. Not comfort, not safety, but the first real sense that this fight, impossible as it seemed only 2 days ago, might actually be one we could win. Commander Grant returned, just before midnight, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes sharp with new purpose. I have orders from higher command, he said, gathering the small team around one of the main screens. We are shifting strategy across every front. No more standing, toe-to-toe in open fields. We draw them into terrain that punishes them. Hills, stairwells, anything with elevation or uneven footing, Every advantage we have starts and ends with the ground beneath our feet. Nathan nodded firmly. About time we had a plan that actually gives us a chance. I looked at Laura, and she looked back at me, both of us worn down from 2 days without real sleep, yet somehow steadier than we had been since this all started. Outside, the sky still held its silent fleet, patient and waiting, but for the first time, I let myself believe that patience might not be enough to save them. The battle for our world had only just begun, but somewhere in the mud and the mistakes of an enemy who had underestimated us completely, the shape of our resistance was finally starting to take form. 3 days after the ships first appeared, we captured one of them alive. I did not witness the moment itself, but I heard about it within minutes, since the news traveled through our command network faster than anything else had since the invasion began. A patrol near the southern hills had found an alien soldier separated from its unit, collapsed beside a fallen piece of equipment, unable to move on its own. Instead of leaving it there, the patrol brought it in, and within hours it had been transported to a secure facility not far from our station. Commander Grant called me personally that morning, his voice carrying an urgency I had not heard from him before. "Ford, I need you and Bennett at the research facility within the hour. They want your analysis on site." I remember the drive there feeling unreal, the streets outside strangely quiet, most people still sheltering indoors, waiting for news that might tell them whether to hope or despair. Laura sat beside me, gripping the edge of her seat, both of us silent for most of the trip, unsure what we were about to walk into. The facility was a converted research building, hastily reinforced with extra security since the invasion began. Inside, a small team of scientists and medical staff worked around a containment area where the alien prisoner rested, still and quiet, its long limbs stretched awkwardly across a reinforced table designed for something far different from its actual shape. A woman named Claire Doyle greeted us at the entrance, introducing herself as the lead researcher assigned to study the prisoner. She looked exhausted, her white coat slightly wrinkled, but her eyes were sharp with the kind of focus that came from working non-stop on something important. "You are the ones who identified the gravity theory," she said, leading us toward the containment area. "Your data helped us confirm something we suspected, but could not prove until now." "What have you found?" I asked, my heart beating faster as we approached the glass wall, separating us from the alien. Up close, the creature looked even more delicate than it had appeared on our screens. Its skin held a pale silver tone, smooth and almost translucent in places, and its limbs, though long, seemed thinner than I expected, built more for grace than for strength. Its chest rose and fell slowly, each breath looking like an effort. Its bone density is far lower than anything we would expect from a species capable of interstellar travel, Claire explained, gesturing to a set of scans displayed on a nearby screen. Its muscles are similarly built for a much lighter environment. Every part of its body suggests it evolved somewhere with significantly weaker gravity than our own. "So our guess was right," Laura said quietly, staring at the scans. "More than right," Claire replied. "We managed to translate a portion of their internal logs recovered from the fallen equipment. According to what we found, their scouting data on Earth's gravity was recorded centuries ago, during what appears to have been a brief flyby survey. Somehow, that old data was never properly updated or verified before they committed to a full invasion." I felt a strange chill pass through me, mixing disbelief with something close to sympathy. An entire invasion force, confident and prepared in every other way, undone by nothing more than a mistake, buried in old records. How could something like that happen? Wouldn't they send closer scans before committing an entire fleet? Claire shook her head slowly. "Based on what we understand so far, their empire has expanded across many worlds using older survey methods, trusting historical data rather than fresh scans, especially for planets considered low priority until recently. It seems Earth was simply never important enough to them before now to warrant a second look." Nathan, who had accompanied us to the facility, stood near the glass with his arms crossed, studying the alien prisoner closely. So, basically, they judged us worth conquering, but not worth double-checking first. It appears that way, Claire said, and that mistake is costing them heavily. Every soldier, every vehicle, every weapon they brought here was designed and built around a much lighter gravitational pull. Coming here was like asking a swimmer, trained only in calm water, to suddenly fight through a violent current without any preparation. I stepped closer to the glass, studying the alien prisoner more closely. Despite everything happening, despite the danger this invasion still posed, I felt a strange pull of curiosity, wanting to understand more about a species that had crossed unimaginable distances only to be undone by something so basic. "Can it communicate?" I asked. Claire nodded. "We have managed limited communication through a translation device we recovered from its equipment. It has been mostly quiet, though we believe that is due to exhaustion and injury rather than defiance." As if responding to our conversation, the creature's eyes opened slowly, dark and strangely calm despite its situation. It turned its head slightly toward the glass, studying us in return with an expression I could not quite read. After a long moment, a soft mechanical voice emerged from a small device attached near its throat, translating words in a slow, careful rhythm. "Your world," it said, "is heavier than recorded." The simplicity of the statement struck me harder than I expected. Here was a being from another world, likely trained for conquest since birth, reduced to speaking the most basic truth of its failure. "Yes," I said, stepping even closer to the glass, unsure if it could even understand me. "Much heavier than you expected." The creature's eyes remained on me, and after a pause, it spoke again. "Our commanders believed this world weak, simple, unprepared." "They were wrong," Nathan said firmly from beside me. The creature did not respond immediately, its gaze shifting toward him, then back toward the ceiling, as if exhausted by even this small exchange. Claire gently placed a hand on my shoulder, guiding me back from the glass. "We will continue gathering information from it as its strength allows," she said. "But this confirms what your data already suggested. Their entire invasion plan was built on outdated information, and that mistake is unraveling everything they attempted to accomplish." Over the following hours, more information filtered through from other facilities and command posts around the world. It seemed every region reporting captured alien soldiers or salvaged equipment found the same pattern repeating. Their weapons, designed with recoil systems calibrated for lighter frames, caused visible strain and injury to the soldiers using them on our world. Their vehicles, built with engines meant to move certain weights easily under lighter gravity, struggled and overheated, attempting the same tasks here. Even their communication devices, delicate and precisely tuned, seemed to malfunction more frequently in an environment their engineers had never accounted for. Commander Grant gathered the team together that evening in a briefing room adjoining the research facility, spreading printed reports and hastily prepared maps across a long table. "We now understand the core weakness of this invasion," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion clearly written across his face. "Every advantage we can find comes from this single mistake. Their bodies, their equipment, their strategy, all of it built for a world lighter than ours." "What does this mean for our next move?" Laura asked, leaning over the maps. "It means we stop reacting and start acting," Grant replied. "We push our advantage everywhere we can. Elevated positions, uneven terrain, extended engagements that force them to endure prolonged physical strain their bodies were never built to handle. Every minute they spend fighting here costs them more than it costs us." Nathan studied the maps closely, tracing a finger along several marked locations. "Command wants coordinated pushes at these points. Force engagements where the terrain does the fighting for us before we even need to." "Exactly," Grant said. "We are not just fighting soldiers anymore. We are fighting an entire strategy built on a fatal miscalculation. Every step we take from here needs to widen that mistake until it breaks them completely." I stood at the edge of the briefing room, watching the plans take shape, still thinking about the quiet voice of the alien prisoner back in its containment cell. Your world is heavier than recorded. Such a simple truth, yet it seemed to be unraveling an invasion that had once looked unstoppable. Later that night, after the briefing ended and most of the team dispersed to prepare for the coming days, I found myself back near the containment area, unable to fully walk away from the strange mixture of fear and curiosity the captured alien stirred in me. Claire was still there, monitoring readings quietly from a nearby console. "Will it recover?" I asked, watching the creature's slow breathing through the glass. "Physically, likely yes, given enough time," Claire said. "Whether its people will listen to what it has to say is another matter entirely." I thought about that for a long moment, staring at the pale, delicate figure resting behind the glass, a being that had crossed the stars only to be humbled by something as simple and unglamorous as weight and gravity. "Do you think they will pull back once they understand the truth?" Claire considered the question carefully before answering. Empires that expand through conquest rarely retreat gracefully from their mistakes. I suspect their commanders will either adjust their strategy quickly or continue pushing forward, unwilling to admit the scale of their miscalculation. Her words settled over me with a quiet weight of their own. Whatever advantage we had found, it would not end this fight on its own. It would take every ounce of strength and strategy we had left to turn this single mistake into a true and lasting victory. Outside, beyond the walls of the research facility, the sky still held its patient fleet, waiting, watching, likely still unaware of just how deeply their own miscalculation had already begun to unravel everything they had planned. But somewhere in that quiet containment room, in the tired eyes of a captured soldier admitting defeat with a single simple sentence, the truth had already been spoken. Our world was heavier than they ever imagined, and that single truth was about to change everything. 5 days into the invasion, the fighting shifted in ways I could hardly have imagined when this all began. Commander Grant's new strategy spread quickly across every front, and reports started coming in from cities and towns I had never even heard of before, all describing the same pattern of success. I remained at the research facility with Laura and Claire, coordinating data between command posts, watching the war unfold through a stream of updates that grew more hopeful with each passing hour. Nathan had been assigned to a forward unit near a range of steep hills just outside the city, tasked with holding a defensive line against an advancing group of alien soldiers. He kept in contact with us through a small radio link, his voice occasionally crackling through the speaker in our command room, giving updates between moments of tense silence. "They are pulling back from the hill approach," Nathan reported one afternoon, his breathing heavy but steady. "Tried pushing up twice already. Both times, they lost ground faster than they gained it. Their legs just cannot handle the incline the same way ours can." I listened closely, picturing the scene in my mind, invaders struggling against a simple hillside that any human soldier could climb without much difficulty. "Any injuries on our side?" I asked. "Minimal," Nathan replied. "We are staying elevated, forcing them to come to us. Every step up that hill costs them more energy than staying put costs us. It's like fighting an enemy that gets weaker with every move they make." Laura leaned toward the radio, adding her own question. "What about their equipment? Are they still bringing heavy gear?" "Less than before," Nathan said. "Word is command posts everywhere are seeing the same thing. Their heavier machines keep breaking down or overheating faster than expected. They are relying more on foot soldiers now, and those soldiers are the ones struggling the most against our terrain." Claire, standing near her monitoring station, allowed herself a small, tired smile. "It seems their entire strategy is collapsing under the weight of their own miscalculation." I thought back to the captured alien soldier resting behind the glass wall in our containment room, its quiet words still echoing in my mind. "Your world is heavier than recorded." It seemed that single truth was becoming the defining weakness of their entire campaign. Over the following days, Similar stories poured in from other regions. In a coastal town far to the north, defenders described drawing invading forces into a long staircase district built into a hillside neighborhood, forcing the alien soldiers into a brutal climb that left many of them unable to continue. In another region, soldiers described luring a group of invaders into a marshland area, where the uneven, shifting ground proved even more punishing than dry hills, causing entire formations to break apart as soldiers struggled just to keep their balance. Commander Grant visited the research facility personally one evening, gathering our small team together to share news directly from Central Command. His face, though still marked with exhaustion, carried a new kind of energy I had not seen since the invasion began. "Their forces are retreating from several key positions," he said, spreading a fresh set of reports across the table. "Central Command believes their overall strategy is shifting from active conquest to damage control. They are pulling back soldiers from difficult terrain and consolidating around flatter regions where their bodies can function more effectively." "Does that mean they're giving up?" Laura asked. "Not entirely," Grant replied carefully, "but it does mean they are losing ground faster than they can replace it. Every soldier lost to exhaustion or environmental strain is one they cannot easily send back into the fight. Unlike wounds from combat, this kind of weakness does not heal quickly, especially this far from their homeworld." I studied the reports laid out before us, seeing patterns emerge across dozens of different battles fought in dozens of different regions, all following the same basic truth. Wherever the terrain worked against them, wherever the ground demanded more effort than their bodies could sustain, their advance crumbled. "What about their ships still in orbit?" I asked. "Are they aware of what's happening down here?" Commander Grant's expression turned more serious. "We believe they are becoming aware, though slower than we would like. Communication intercepts suggest confusion among their command structure. Reports of unexpected losses are being sent upward, but it appears their leadership is struggling to understand exactly why their forces are failing so consistently." Nathan's voice crackled through the radio again, just as the meeting continued, his tone carrying a note of cautious excitement. "Command, we just watched an entire unit retreat without engaging us at all. They saw the hill, saw our position, and turned back before we even fired a single shot." Grant leaned toward the radio. "Confirm that, Price. They retreated without engagement?" "Confirmed," Nathan replied. "Looks like word is spreading among their ranks, too. They're starting to avoid terrain that punishes them before we even need to fight." A quiet sense of disbelief settled over the room. What had begun as a desperate, uncertain defense against an overwhelming force was slowly transforming into something closer to a coordinated counterattack, built entirely around a single, simple truth about the very ground beneath our feet. Claire, still watching her monitoring station, called our attention to a new stream of data. "I am seeing increased signal activity near their primary landing zones. It looks like they are gathering remaining forces into more concentrated positions, likely trying to consolidate strength rather than spread thin across difficult terrain." "That gives us an opportunity," Grant said, studying the data carefully. "If they are pulling back into fewer, more defensible positions, we can concentrate our own efforts more effectively as well. Rather than chasing scattered units across the countryside, we push toward denying them any stable ground to regroup." Over the next 2 days, I watched from the command room as coordinated efforts spread across multiple fronts, human forces working together with a precision and confidence that had been completely absent during the chaotic first hours of the invasion. Reports of retreating alien units grew more common, each one accompanied by the same basic explanation. Their bodies simply could not endure the physical demands our world placed upon them, especially not while trying to fight at the same time. I remember one report in particular, relayed through Nathan late on the 6th day, describing a moment that struck me deeply, despite the ongoing tension of everything happening around us. A group of alien soldiers, cut off from resupply and unable to continue their advance up a rocky incline, had simply stopped fighting altogether, setting down their weapons and remaining still, clearly unable to continue, despite orders likely still coming from somewhere above. "They didn't surrender exactly," Nathan explained over the radio, his voice quieter than usual. "They just stopped, like their bodies gave out before their will did." I thought about the captured soldier, still resting in our containment facility, its pale eyes and simple words carrying more truth than any of their advanced technology ever could. Our world was heavier than recorded, and that single fact, small and unglamorous as it seemed, was slowly bringing an entire invasion to its knees. Commander Grant remained cautious despite the growing successes, reminding our team repeatedly that a wounded enemy could still be dangerous, especially one with technology as advanced as theirs. Yet even his caution carried a lighter tone with each passing day as more reports confirmed the same pattern across every front where the fighting continued. On the evening of the 7th day, as I sat with Laura reviewing yet another batch of encouraging reports, Claire approached us with fresh readings from the research facility's monitoring equipment. "Their orbital fleet is showing unusual movement patterns," she said, spreading a printout across the table between us. "Ships are repositioning, some moving away from their previous formation entirely." Laura studied the data closely. "Do you think they're preparing another wave of soldiers?" Claire shook her head slowly. "Based on the pattern, it looks more like consolidation. Some ships appear to be preparing for departure entirely." I felt my breath catch slightly at the possibility hanging in those words. "You think they might actually be retreating? Leaving the planet altogether?" "It is too early to say for certain," Claire replied carefully. "But given everything we have seen over the past several days, it would not surprise me if their leadership is beginning to question whether this invasion is worth the cost they are paying." Commander Grant, who had been listening quietly nearby, finally spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of cautious optimism rather than outright celebration. "Whatever they decide, we cannot afford to let our guard down yet. But I will admit, for the first time since this began, I believe we might actually be winning this fight." I looked toward the window of the research facility, gazing up at a sky that had held nothing but fear and uncertainty for the past week. Somewhere above those clouds, an entire alien fleet was grappling with the consequences of a mistake made long before any of us had even known they existed. A mistake buried in old records and outdated surveys, now unraveling everything they had planned. Our world, heavy and unyielding beneath our feet, was proving to be a defense far greater than any weapon we could have built ourselves. And as the 7th day drew to a close, I allowed myself, cautiously and carefully, to believe that this fight, impossible as it had once seemed, might truly be turning in our favor. On the 10th day, the voice returned to every broadcast channel across the world, the same deep, steady tone that had once demanded our surrender. This time, the words were different, and I remember exactly where I was standing when I heard them, back at the research facility, gathered with Laura, Claire, and Commander Grant around a small speaker set at the center of our command table. "People of this world," the voice said, carrying none of the confidence it once held, "hostilities are suspended. Remaining forces are instructed to withdraw." Nobody in the room spoke for several long seconds. I felt a strange lightness spread through my chest, disbelief mixing with something close to relief, though I did not yet trust myself to fully believe what I had just heard. "Did they just surrender?" Laura asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Commander Grant remained still, listening carefully as the broadcast continued, offering brief instructions for their remaining ground units to gather at designated points for departure, promising no further offensive action from their side. When the message finally ended, silence filled the room once again, heavier this time with disbelief rather than fear. "I think they did," Grant finally said, letting out a slow breath he seemed to have been holding for days. "I think this is really happening." Over the following hours, confirmation poured in from command posts around the world. Alien forces that had once advanced with unstoppable confidence were now retreating toward their landing zones, abandoning damaged equipment, gathering their remaining soldiers for evacuation. Reports described entire units simply walking away from positions they had fought hard to hold only days earlier, their will to continue clearly broken by something far more basic than any weapon humanity had used against them. I stayed close to the radio that day, listening as Nathan's voice came through with updates from the front lines, his tone carrying a mixture of caution and quiet disbelief that mirrored everything the rest of us felt. "They're pulling back everywhere," he reported. "No resistance, just retreat. Looks like their commanders finally accepted what their soldiers already knew days ago." "Any signs of them regrouping for another push?" Grant asked. "None so far," Nathan replied. "If anything, it looks like they're in a hurry to leave before things get any worse for them." Over the following 2 days, the alien fleet above us began a slow, deliberate withdrawal, ships departing in smaller groups rather than the coordinated formation they had arrived in. I watched from the tracking station, the same monitors that had once shown me the terrifying arrival of an overwhelming invasion force, now showing the same ships retreating into the darkness of space, their confidence clearly shattered by an enemy they had never expected to face. Not our weapons, not our armies. Simply the ground beneath our feet, and the pull of a planet they had never bothered to properly measure before committing everything to conquering it. Claire remained at the research facility a while longer, continuing her work with the captured alien soldier, who had grown stronger over the following days as its body slowly adjusted, at least partially, to the demands of our world. I visited once more before the final ships departed, curious to see how the creature was faring, and found it sitting upright for the first time since its capture, its pale eyes following me as I approached the glass. "Your people are leaving," I said quietly, unsure if it would respond. The creature studied me for a long moment before speaking through its small translation device. "Yes. Cost too great. Miscalculation too severe. Do you think they will come back someday, better prepared?" I asked, genuinely curious despite everything that had happened. It considered the question carefully before answering. "Perhaps. Though this world will remain heavy, regardless of preparation, some truths cannot be avoided, only endured." I thought about that answer for a long time afterward, long after the last ship finally disappeared from our sensors, long after the celebrations began spreading through cities and towns around the world, people stepping outside for the first time in over a week without fear hanging over their heads. Our gravity, something so basic that most of us had never given it a second thought before this invasion began, had proven itself the greatest defender our world could have ever asked for. In the weeks that followed, stories spread quickly about exactly what had happened, pieced together from captured logs, translated communications, and the careful analysis performed by scientists like Claire, working tirelessly to understand every detail of what had nearly happened to us. The invading species, it turned out, came from a world with significantly weaker gravity than our own, their bodies and technology built entirely around that lighter environment across countless generations. Their scouting data on Earth, gathered centuries earlier during a brief and imprecise survey, had drastically underestimated our planet's gravitational pull, leading their commanders to believe conquering us would be a simple, low-risk endeavor. That single, ancient mistake, buried in old records and never properly verified, had unraveled an entire invasion force that might otherwise have proven unstoppable. Their soldiers, however skilled and however advanced their weapons, simply could not endure the physical demands our world placed upon them, not while trying to fight, advance, and hold territory all at the same time. Their machines, precisely engineered for a lighter pull, strained and failed under conditions their designers had never accounted for. And their leadership, faced with mounting losses that had nothing to do with our own strength or skill, ultimately chose retreat over continued disaster. I remember sitting with Laura and Nathan several weeks after the final ship departed, The three of us gathered in a quiet cafe that had reopened once life slowly began returning to normal. Nathan looked lighter somehow, the tension that had gripped his shoulders throughout the invasion finally beginning to ease. "Still strange to think about," he said, stirring his coffee absently. "All that firepower, all that advanced technology, and in the end, it was just our own planet that beat them." Laura smiled slightly, shaking her head. "When people ask what stopped the invasion, I still don't know how to explain it without sounding ridiculous. Our gravity did it. Not our weapons, not our armies, just the simple fact of how heavy our own world is." "Maybe that's exactly the point," I said, thinking back to the quiet words of the captured alien soldier, resting behind that glass wall, admitting defeat, with nothing more than a simple truth about the ground beneath its feet. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't something you build. It's just something you already have, without even realizing it. We sat together for a while longer, watching the world outside slowly return to its ordinary rhythm. People walking along the streets, children playing in parks, life continuing forward despite everything that had nearly been lost. Above us, the sky remained quiet and empty, no longer holding the silent, waiting fleet that had once threatened to change everything about our world forever. Commander Grant, when I spoke with him one final time before he returned to his regular duties, offered a reflection that stayed with me long afterward. "We spent so much time preparing for threats we could see coming," he said. "Bigger weapons, stronger defenses, faster ships. In the end, what saved us was something we never even thought to consider a weapon at all." I think about that conversation often, even now, months after the invasion ended and life slowly returned to something resembling normal. We live on a world we rarely stop to appreciate, a planet whose simple, unglamorous pull holds us steady every single day without us ever noticing its quiet strength. It took an invasion from beings far more advanced than ourselves to remind us just how much that simple force truly mattered. Perhaps somewhere out among the stars, other worlds continue watching us, studying us, wondering whether our planet remains a target worth pursuing. If they do return someday, better prepared and more careful in their calculations, I hope we remember exactly what saved us the first time. Not just our courage, though that certainly mattered. Not just our willingness to fight, though that mattered too, but the simple, steady truth of a world that never asked to be conquered, and refused, in its own quiet way, to make that conquest easy. Our world remains heavy, steady, and unyielding beneath our feet, exactly as it always has been. And if history has taught us anything from those 10 unforgettable days, it is this. Sometimes the greatest defense a world can offer isn't built by hands or minds at all. Sometimes it is simply written into the very ground we walk upon, patient and unnoticed, until the moment it is needed most.